Hi, it's the Thesterninator.
And I did a fun little experiment recently. I went on our Discord and decided I was going to make a poll. That poll included some of the franchises that I'd been talking about or thinking about turning into Pokemon recently. And it included things like Undertale, more Five Nights at Freddy's stuff, Kaiju, as well as the winner of this little poll, which is, you probably know because you saw the thumbnail, so you're very well in the loop on that, Poppy's Playtime. And that was a ton of fun. So I went into this not realizing that was what was going to win. Oh, no! I know next to nothing about Poppy's Playtime. It was the only thing on that list that I know nothing about.
You get nothing. You lose.
Good day, sir.
So I had to do a little bit of research, so bear with me as we kind of stumble through today's video. I'm hoping it works out okay. Be sure to let me know down in the comments below. And join that Discord if you want to be a part of more conversations like this. I'm probably going to do more polls like this because they're a ton of fun and really allow me to be just as surprised by the outcome as you guys. So I'm actually going to be moving those polls to the Patreon. So go and hop into the Patreon if you want to be a part of those conversations and a part of what comes next in videos. But until then, let's go ahead and hop into today's video.
Hello and welcome to the channel. I'm the Thesterninator, but my friends call me Stern, and today we're taking a look into Poppy Playtime as Pokemon. Playtime Co is famous for taking concepts often associated with childhood and turning them into strange and unusual physical manifestations of nightmares. Right up our alley, actually. The concept of the game is that Playtime Co has been utilizing humans in bizarre experiments to create real and living creatures based off of their most profitable toy collections. Luckily, their in-house orphanage is chock full of victims. I mean children. So to start off today's video, why not work with Playtime Co's greatest success and most profitable product, Huggy Wuggy. When looking at inspiration for this design, it should feel obvious, right? Huggy Wuggy is a fairly simple character. Well, that's actually the first problem that I ran into with these designs. They're so simple that I found it difficult to add or change anything about them to make them feel more Pokemon inspired. I mean, looking at him, he currently stands as Huggy Wuggy is a pretty Pokemonified design already. The idea of Playtime Co was to create something that felt like it could be your friend. Huggy Wuggy was designed specifically to give great hugs, and that's kind of the same design narrative that the Pokemon company strives after, as well as what they try to do. Rather than basing the whole line off of Huggy Wuggy, I decided to look at some of the other inspirations that allowed him to come into existence in the first place. This first form, with its diminutive more size, is much more akin to the mini Huggies found in the Whack-A-Wuggy minigame found in Chapter 2, and I think I kinda dig that. I thought of the idea of being able to come across this Pokemon in a variety of colors, almost hidden amongst the grass and flowers of an outside area. As they blend in with the colorful petals of the surrounding flowers, they may pop up to say hello before ducking back under to much more simulate the minigame found in Chapter 2. His head reminds me almost of what I'd picture a cartoonish goblin looking like, so I went with that. And so this is Wuglin, the name a combination of Huggy Wuggy and Goblin. It is the hugging Pokemon and is a pure normal type, for now. I don't know what I'm going to do with that later, but for the moment it's a normal type. Not too powerful as it's very small and not quite well versed in fighting yet. And for the shiny, you'll notice I went with the Kissy Missy color scheme, making it pink. While I see this as having a varied number of colors, I see it almost like the Minior line, where there's one specific color that is more associated to the shiny than the rest.
You may have heard your kids mention Huggy Wuggy.
But that's not the end for the toy design to give the perfect hug. Oh no, as we know, Huggy Wuggy goes through quite the terrifying transformation in game and becomes this sharp-toothed, wide-eyed monster. And so it only makes sense that our lovable little Wuglin evolved to better fit that idea of the character design. Much like before, this design needed some oomphin'. Not to say that there's anything wrong with the Huggy Wuggy design, it's actually quite the opposite. It's so simplistic that adding on remains a trial. So I took that goblin idea from before and looking at the fur patterns of the initial prompt, decided to build upon it and introduce some like Yeti vibes? I don't know. I wanted to keep the mouth, the eyes, the gloves, and the color, but just add some slight variation to these aesthetics. I'm not trying to fix the design. That's never the attempt in these types of drawing experiments. No, instead I'm wanting to translate them into the Pokemon style. Sometimes that means taking some creative liberties or reinterpreting accounts of its inspiration rather than the actual physical design. looking at what built the character out idea-wise rather than what builds it out physically. I mean, I could add extra legs, extra arms, extra eyes, whatever, but if it doesn't fit the physical body of the creature being inspired by this, or the story of that character, it doesn't work. Huggy Wuggy has been left alone in this factory since the early 90s, so I wanted to introduce some wear to the overall look and bring in some darker and ultimately damper colors to the lower halves of the appendages. I think it gets the point across without getting too gross or distracting. It also lets us break up the shapes into a little bit more different patterns and areas, which I consider a positive. I grew up with Gens 2 and 3, and they're really good about this, bringing in lines and stripes and things to kind of break up that base color and base structure. So I wanted to emulate that a little bit here. For the gloves, the wiki actually states that he does have fingers, they're just fused together. So I wanted to incorporate that a little bit more into the design to further differentiate it from the previous form and give that unsettling type of atmosphere. Like, there's been some growth here and some change from the lovable, huggy little character that we had before into something a little bit more monstrous that feels a little too human. And so, this is Hug-a-Wug. The name is a reference to Huggy Wuggy as well as bugbears, a D&D race that are kind of an extent of hobgoblins, and I feel like that really works here, especially with that goblin inspiration that I took with the previous form. It's now normal fighting type and is both in a playful stance as well as almost like a karate kicking stance now that I look at it. Again, the shiny is comparable to Kissy Missy, who is the counterpart to Huggy Wuggy, and you can see on the bottom right there that it has definitely grown in size. I needed to make sure that no matter what I did, it felt like it could tower over a player.
The Sault Ste. Marie Police Department sent a Facebook warning to parents about Huggy Wuggy today.
In Chapter 2, we were introduced to a new antagonist in the Playtime Co saga with Mommy Longlegs. By the way, whoever came up with the name Mommy Longlegs for a children's toy deserves to be captured in a web and ripped apart with their internal organs being eaten by this thing, because hearing that name, I had a very different enemy image in my head. Seriously, Mommy Longlegs, they need a new naming department. She was an experiment by Playtime Co in a new polymer that would allow her to wrap around poles and fixtures, and was a pretty successful toy until a child is turned into one and ends up chasing you down the halls of the abandoned factory in both Chapter 2, Fly in a Web, and sort of in Project Playtime. I'm not that far into the synopsis yet, so reminder, I'm learning about this as we go so that I can get better inspiration for these creatures. It's something that I highly recommend to people. Make Pokemon off of stuff that you know, and if you can't make it off of stuff that you know, learn about it so that you can make stuff off of it. I'm just now getting into the Poppy Playtime serious lore, so it's a fun experiment and a fun game to kind of play. Yeah, that's it. That's the whole thing. She's able to fabricate webs of web material as well as intricate webs of games and traps to foil the player character, introducing us to a number of other smaller characters throughout the series before she's inevitably crushed by the Crusher. Seriously, naming group. Let's get on this. We seriously have names like Mommy Longlegs, but Kick Me Paul didn't pass the approval test? Regardless, I wanted to take the aspects of her that are fairly well understood, like her essentially functioning as a spider enemy up to the point that her basement theme is Itsy Bitsy Spider, and fusing that with her initial inspiration of Betty Spaghetti toys. I took the whirls and swirls of her hair and built and expanded on them to make her this springing spider-like monstrosity. Not too different from her actual design if I'm being truthfully honest, but different enough that I can say that I'd love to have this thing on my team. This design is just so fun, and watching it scurry around while bounding on its springy legs would be well worth it to have her as a following Pokemon. I'm not a huge fan of following Pokemon, haven't been since Pokemon Yellow, but this one may be something that changes my mind completely, just to see her kind of gangle about. And so this is Harvest, a play on Harvestman, which is the actual name for Daddy Longlegs spiders, and Princess, because she's our little princess. She's the long-legged Pokemon and is a bug fairy type. For her shiny, I went with that silver color to mimic Project Playtime's design of characters like her. And yeah, she's a mono stage Pokemon, but she's very cool. I am so tired of mono stages kind of getting the short end of the stick. I think that they can be really interesting and really fun, and yeah, for the size and that silhouette, I mean, first off, look at that silhouette. I wanted her to feel like she could be human-ish sized, but just kind of squatted down on those springy legs.
The tall, lanky blue character with razor-sharp teeth is the main villain in a horror computer game called Poppy Playtime.
I think Catnap is the character that first introduced me to the grander schemes of this franchise. I remember seeing it and its design and thinking, oh, what game is this from? I was surprised to learn not just that Poppy Playtime was divided into chapters, but that the designs were so vast and varied. Mascot horror has been a thing ever since, I don't know. You would think that it would start with Five Nights at Freddy's, but it's existed long before that. I remember being afraid of a local restaurant that we had because the characters would dress up and walk around. It wasn't even like a Chuck E. Cheese or a Rock-afire Explosion style setup. It was just, they had a character that would walk around very Ronald McDonald-like, and I was terrified. So that fear has just existed in us for quite some time. Five Nights at Freddy's, however, was this broader launching off point that inspired games like Bendy and the Ink Machine, Poppy Playtime, Garten of Banban, and a litany of knockoffs associated with those properties. I do have to say, though, that during my research into Playtime Co., I think that Mob Entertainment, the developers of Poppy Playtime, really have a very specific handle on this project. Catnap was introduced as a member of the Smiling Critters line as a toy designed to help kids sleep by emitting a lavender-scented mist. But instead, the broad sales of this toy revealed that it was emitting a red gas that would induce these horrible nightmares, leading to its recall. While Playtime Co. had already experienced a lot of backlash, it was at least specific to its employees. Now the wide world was aware of the dangers that these toys could cause. For this idea, I took on that name, Catnap, a short nap taken in the midday. I thought about Pokemon like Musharner that are dream-based and wanted to incorporate something similar into this design, and so thought about this sleepy little cat whose tail formed into a little dream cloud over its head. This Pokemon would be immune to non-self-induced sleep-type attacks, as it's already sleeping most of the time. Think Kamala, but mixed with a Cheshire cat. And so this is Natcap, swapping around some of the letters for Catnap. Sorry, this is kind of a tongue twister. And using the phrase nightcap, usually meant a drink taken before bed. It is the waking Pokemon, which is weird, being that it's asleep, but we'll get to that in just a moment. It is a psychic dark type, and for the shiny, I went with this stony gray color for actual cats, specifically my cat. And these purple outlines across where the dark outlines are in the normal form. For its size, you'll notice it's very small, very diminutive. I wanted it to look very much just like your average everyday cat who wakes up just to walk around and find a new place to take a nap. Now before we move, what is all that?
Huggy Wuggy has become a bit of a craze, popping up in videos on TikTok and YouTube.
When Natcap does find itself drifting deeper into its constant slumber, it falls under effects similar to those brought on of the red mist seen in Chapter 3. It itself begins to have these vivid nightmares that manifest themselves in this misty tale, leading to a darker self to appear. Very similar to the Musharna that we did for our Porico series, but I'll digress from that. If you want to see more of that, it's on the channel as well. It's a whole ARG we're running, but I'm not going to advertise my other videos in the middle of this one. Any more? It's a skeletal cat with freakishly long limbs, and that is difficult for me to fit into the Pokemon style, so I took the coward's way out, and it made it all a dream. Now, the elongated legs of Catnap are the willowy wisps of dream smog emitting from Natcap's tail as this new form grins menacingly down on its prey. Catnap's thin purplish body I adapted into this smoke monster, which is not uncommon in the world of media. I think back to James and the Giant Peach and how this fear of rhinos manifested itself into this smoky shadow rhinoceros that rampaged through the night sky, or how in Rise of the Guardians, the boogeyman, Pitch Black, was draped in a shadowy cloak that blended into his very skin. Nightmares are where reality and dreams collide, turning our real-world fears into hazy reimagining of monsters and terrors alike. And so, I brought Catnap into its likely conclusion, by having it become the very nightmare that it was instilling in those children, now instilled into its own physical body so that it can manifest itself in ghostly, apparition-y form.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
And so we have Netcap Sleep form. In this form, it gets a big bump in power. And again, I'm not super 100% certain on how this is going to work out in the mechanics of a game. So let me know down in the comments. As usual, I'm asking you guys to help me come up with the abilities and dex entries for these Pokemon because you're just so good at it and I'm just so bad at it. For the shiny, I went with that smoky type of vibe, just like we saw in the previous version. I know a lot of people are going to say, well, if it is the Dream Mist, why not make it red? Reason is because I didn't fully think of that until just now doing the video. So maybe we'll imagine it being red for future iterations. I don't know. If you're in the Discord, I'll post this as well as the red version so you can get both. Maybe this is a Pokemon that has 2 shinies. Wouldn't that be fun? So yeah, join the Discord if you want to see more extra stuff like that, as well as the Patreon where I'll be doing polls on weekly, monthly, whatever it may be videos. Still working on that.
Oh! Huggy Wuggy has become the stuff of nightmares.
Children have very active imaginations. Monsters in the closet, monsters under the bed.
So far, we've been exploring the main antagonists of each chapter, Huggy Wuggy, Mommy Longlegs, and Catnap. But there's one character who I wanted to make sure I took care of in this video. He may not be specifically an antagonist, but he does exist and is one of my favorites, and that is Dog Day. Dog Day functions as the supposed counterpart to Catnap, with each wearing a corresponding collar. Catnap wears a moon, Dog Day wears a sun, and all is well. However, when we do come across Dog Day in game, it feels very unlike things being all well. If what they say is true and every dog has their day, then this certainly isn't his, and we find him chained up to a cell, his lower half missing. He's seemingly being tortured by Catnap and is one of the few who hasn't come under the control of the prototype, the long-running villain of the series, often indicated by a bone and metal claw, seemingly reaching out of nowhere. Kind of interestingly enough, it reminds me of how puppets work, being manipulated by a larger hand. Sorry to spoil it for you, everyone who thought puppets were real living beings. And it feels very on brand for what's going on here. Everyone being puppeted by a large hand. Given his odd ability to not be taken over completely as Dog Day, he actually attempts to help the player with his fun and delightful catchphrase.
Leave me. Please, just go!
By the end, he's a shell of his former self, but that's not what he was ever meant to be. And so looking for my design, I wanted to look at the original Dog Day as a happy and wide-eyed pupper, just looking to help. But I did also incorporate these peely bits like the ears, tail, and muzzle to somewhat reference the idea of medieval flaying, where skin is ripped off. But that's not important right now. Look at his little face. Being that I just recently did a stuffed animal dog for our Five Nights at Freddy's series with Fetch, I wanted to go a different direction. I didn't want this to feel like a plush, didn't want it to feel like a toy, instead feeling like just a fun little dog. So this is Shindo, the enlightened Pokemon. Its name coming from Shin as a reference to shine and Do as a reference to dog. Shine, dog also sounds a little bit like Fido. He's a normal type, and for the shiny I went with this fun purple, just to kind of reference its correspondence to Catnap. It's not super powerful right now, with its power levels really kind of akin to the Catnap Pokemon that we designed, and I feel almost like these would be counterparts in-game as well. Maybe not version exclusives, but something similar to that. I don't know. I'll play around with it a little bit. Let me know in the comments what you think on that type of stuff.
Spawned from an online video game. Police Chief Wesley Bierling says videos of Huggy Wuggy are being circulated to children on YouTube, TikTok, and any online search engine.
As much as I love Dog Day, we have to acknowledge the elephant in the room. Things don't turn out good for him. As his hanging, decrepit body is strung up in this makeshift multicolored prison, he eventually can't hold on any longer. Foregoing the brainwashing used by Catnap in his quote-unquote church, Dog Day is instead stuffed with smiling critters who puppet his body throughout the halls, chasing the player through long corridors and tunnels. It's true you are equipped to defend yourself, but it doesn't really have any effect on Dog Day. So it's a fight or flight, and brother, this is one dogfight you ain't walking away from. For the design, I wanted to create this amalgamated mass of stuffed toys and garbage around Shindo, with his ears and muzzle flap now draped over his face, almost ashamed at what he's become. He's still trapped in there, much like Dog Day, but I don't know. Something else is currently holding the steering wheel. So yeah, that's kind of the design I went with. It's actually very similar to
That person, Edward.
This definitely goes a darker route as Pokemon designs, and I took inspiration from Muck, Blood Moon Ursaluna, Ultra Beasts, and a gaggle of ghost types. Much like how Natcap got a sleep form, this Pokemon has a corresponding form as well that will change depending on certain criteria. Let me know down in the comments what you think that criteria should be. We kind of have one for our Natcap character, but let me know. These really need to feel like corresponding characters, and I always have a tough time with abilities, as you may already know. So go down to the comments and let me know what you think. And while you're down there, drop a like and check out our community Discord. Maybe you'll be member number 1000. And once we hit 1,000 members, I'll be doing another giveaway just like we did with Into the Pit, where we gave away 3 copies of the game. We did that for reaching 200 members, so 1,000 members has got to be a little bit bigger. So head on over and see what we can do. So this is Shindo Awakened form, in correspondence to Natcap's Sleep form. This is the Enlightened Pokemon. It's a normal ghost type, and that shiny was so cool. I fully thought about just scrapping this design, using the shiny for the main colors, but I feel like I really wanted to stick with some of those initial colors from the previous version. Let me know what you think and how this guy should form up into this version of itself. You'll notice that it's gotten the same increase in power that we got when Natcap got its Sleep form. So yeah, Sleep versus Awakened. I picture Awakened as kind of meaning it's now filled with the other spirits, and so it is awake while its main body is asleep. It's kind of all over the place, but stick with me here, bear with me. For the size, I wanted to go with something big that was looming over your character player, very much like we did with the Natcap version. So yeah, that was a ton of fun.
So in this video, I learned a lot about a franchise that I knew nothing about at the start, and I have to say it was a joy doing so. We were able to look at different characters that I found myself really drawn to and turn them into Pokemon. Taking these fun little characters of Pokemon and seeing how we could throw on the concept of making them twisted and dark and bizarre and
The idea of Playtime Co was to create something that felt like concepts often associated with childhood by having it and turning them into very nightmare that it was instilling manifestations of nightmares.